Podcast blah, 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 blah. Podcast Chris, podcast 112. We've been waiting 967 days for you to record this podcast.
Not waiting on me, bro. You are internet-less.
My internet went down again all week. I
Yeah,
just got it back today at like 1 o'clock. Dumb. How dumb is that?
silly.
They had to replace all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Now I'm getting
Good.
2 months free of internet for the inconvenience and hassle that I had to deal with.
Now you can pay me what you owe me.
You know what I told them? I told the guy, I said, dude, I said, now I don't have to listen to this guy named Chris Worthing
Yeah.
complain that I'm not recording my podcast. And he started laughing. I said, all the
He's,
guy's doing is complaining.
he said, no way.
He's like, what? You got a podcast? I said, yeah, I do. You just saved me.
He saved him
Save me.
the hassle of listening.
Yes, the hassle of listening to him complain.
Did he ask you for an autograph?
No, he did not. He
He
didn't
asked for
care
my autograph?
He did not. He didn't care one bit.
He didn't ask me for. Oh man.
He fixed the internet, told him to get out of my house. Hope I never see him again.
Yeah, get lost, pal.
Um, today's podcast, we're going to talk about several different varieties of seeds that you could plant or should you plant. And I have a whole list here, and it doesn't necessarily have to do with spring planting. It could be fall planting, but and we'll explain that. But the whole thing when it comes to a food plot, quote unquote program, is you should always look ahead and say why am I planning this? What
Yeah,
is the
what's
purpose?
the end product here?
Yep. What is the purpose of me? What is the purpose of me planning it, and what is the benefit going to be? Because there's different benefits to each one, and you need to look ahead and say, okay, if I plant this now, what are my benefits months on from now? 2 months, 5 months, 6 months. What is the end result and end goal? So the first one is should somebody plant soybeans? So I'll go first on it, and I'm going to say probably not. You should probably not plant soybeans unless you have a minimum. I'm just going to throw a number. I'm going to say a minimum of 5 acres. If you don't have a minimum of 5 acres, most likely the deer will wipe them soybeans out, and you won't have any food if that's your main food that you're planting in the wintertime. Because if they wipe them down, you have no pods left for the for you know in the wintertime above ground food where the pods are above the snow level. Now if they eat them all spring and summer and they wipe you out, who cares really? You fed them, but if your purpose of planting them, look ahead. If your goal is I'm going to plant these things in the middle of May, and the goal of having pods in the wintertime for above ground food, is this going to be worth it? Do I have enough acreage to plant soybeans for them to last long enough to get the pods in the wintertime? Me and you planted soybeans. I planted them
Hmm.
several times, but at the old farm, they wipe you out.
Yeah.
I had to fence them things off with a dual perimeter electric solar powered fence. It's a pain in the butt. I had to leave them things uh, covered for I think 45 days. I took the fence off, and they just
Gone in
an,
like a
an,
week.
annihilated them. And that
Like
was
a
that
week.
was that was 3 acres of beans. But
Right?
also keep in mind that was a big woods setting, no ag fields, nobody else was doing food plots in the area, and that was the legit food source in the area.
Right?
That was the only food. So
Yeah.
you have to weigh the pros and cons to it, how many deer you have per square mile, and what is the benefit and or long-term goal of soybeans. So what do
Right.
you think about that?
Well, I say, every everything you plant has to be done. I'm losing my earphones. Everything you plant has to be done in a certain time frame too.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not proper timing, maybe you don't want to do that. And what I mean by that is, like you were just saying, if you plant them in May or June, which isn't bad timing, but what I mean by that is providing, if you have a property that has a low density during the summertime, you might have a chance at them propagating and growing and having some sort of a crop there for them. If you're like my instance, where you have 20 some deer in a field every night, any month of the year,
Not
you're
good.
not going to get jack grown in there. You got to go with high stem count things, something that's replenishable, something that comes back after being browsed. A lot of these, like a soybean, I would say that, if they get browsed heavily, they're gonna wipe them down to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a timing thing, an issue with the population and the timing of the year. You definitely wouldn't want to plant them too late, uh, because they're going to come in there in droves and wipe you out anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely, like you said, it has to deal with how much acreage that you're planting them and what your deer population is.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so I
Yep.
do agree.
I mean, there's balance too of it. How much. How is your habitat in your timber? Do you have a lot of woody browse, other food sources within the area?
Hmm.
But if you're relying solely on soybeans, most
Yeah,
times I
I don't
think you're
think I would ever have a standalone crop of
yeah,
just soybean
right.
because you're putting too many eggs in one basket.
Be
If that
sadly disappointed.
you can be. Yep.
Um, Next up, one of my favorites. I know this is Chris's favorite or one of his favorites, but should somebody plant clover?
Oh,
You go you go first on this one.
I love having clover, and like, well, this piggybacks right off of what we just said. I would never have a standalone crop, so somewhere in your bag of tricks, you'd better have clover planted. Clover is king in my book. Um, I mean, there's always something there that's green for them. You're feeding them 365 with that crop, and it's one of the highest things. I mean, it carries its protein amounts. Providing your fertility's good, it carries high protein amounts for you, um, nutritionally. I mean, it's a total package. Uh, some people are void of clover certain times a year. I like to have it all year somewhere in your plan. Uh, I don't know. I can't say much more than that. What would you add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I love clover as well. I think it's a pretty uh
Low
amazing.
maintenance.
Yeah, it's low maintenance. You can mow it to keep it, set back. But a lot of times, if you get lucky or whatever, you don't have to mow it. The deer keep it mowed for you.
Right.
If you have a balance between the size of a plot and how many deer you have that are consuming it, they can a lot of times keep it mowed down for you. But I think it's a great crop to plant. It keeps up with the browse pressure, especially on like little smaller plots. And then, I think a lot of, if it's appropriate for your land, um, that you could have like a big, you know, say 3, 4, 5, 6 acre plot of just clover to feed your deer. If you need to provide that, if you're trying to build a deer herd or whatever, that big area could be like this big giant, destination, food source, and those deer would feed in there. I mean, year round, all
Yeah.
all night long.
Oh yeah.
So it can provide a lot of food, a lot of
Yeah.
tonnage per acre.
Yeah. I have that 2 acre destination plot of clover, and
Hmm.
a couple years back we had some folks comment and say, oh well, what good's that doing them during the winter? Well, then I went out with the video camera and walked around the plot videoing where they were digging for it. They were digging through 8 inches of snow to get to that clover.
You proved your haters wrong.
I did. So I mean, it's a high value. It really is. I
Yeah,
mean,
I love it.
and normally it's pretty cheap. It's pretty foolproof. I mean, if you've got bare ground, you can throw it out there before a rain, and you're gonna have clover. I mean,
Hmm.
and it adds nitrogen to the ground. You know, you bank that up. Even if you want to plant something in it next year and change your plan, you know, you've got that banked nitrogen in there once it establishes. I don't think you can go wrong with clover.
Hmm.
Just there again, don't plant a standalone clover patch either. I get a lot of questions sometimes. Well, what clover do you plant? Well, I plant clover with different varieties. 3 or 4 different varieties of clovers. There's different varieties of whites and reds and things, and I like to mix that together so that you don't have just one variety because you know you might have mistakenly picked a variety that likes wet ground and you're in full sun and it gets wilted or doesn't grow as well, or
Hmm.
vice versa. You might have picked a white clover that doesn't do well in wet ground or something, so pay attention to that as well.
Hmm. Next up, another one of my favorites is, should somebody plant buckwheat?
Buckwheat.
Buckwheat. I'll go.
We go ahead.
Um, go back and forth. Wait your turn.
Wait your turn.
Wait your turn. Uh, yeah. So buckwheat. I love planting buckwheat, except when Chris recommends to buy it from a farmer, don't buy it because it filled my entire field up with weed seed, and I could
Yeah,
have I could
I didn't have all that weedy stuff like you did.
could have shot you for that.
I didn't
Um,
get all that weed.
it was brutal. Um, but buckwheat, it's an amazing crop to plant. It's very fast growing, high moisture content. It matures in 45, 55 days. White flowers, then you get the seeds. I mean, Chris planted at his house. I got tons of videos, with the butterflies and the bees in there and stuff, and
Yeah.
with the white flowers and stuff. But I think if you're looking for an annual that grows very fast and you want to kind of help build your soil up, maybe it's a first year plot, and you're not looking necessarily for, something for the deer to feed on. Yes, they will eat it, but not really. Um, you can disc that back into the soil, and it's a great crop to help build your soil up. I've planted it many times, and we just turn that right back in, and then that'll lead you right into your fall food plot. I think it's a great crop to plant for building soil.
It it is the seed's not real terribly expensive,
Hmm.
and what you get from that product is standing fertilizer, literally, because at some point you're going to knock it down and till it in for the green manure portion of it, and you can literally feed your next crop with that what you've tilled in.
Hmm.
Once it gets into the ground and it starts to deteriorate, you can feed that next plot. Um, the thing I really like about it, I love watching the bees.
Hmm.
And right now there's a shortage of honeybees. I mean, that are doing their thing out there, pollinating and whatnot. And I guess that's a thing of the past. A lot of these bee farmers and things, but when you plant buckwheat, you will be amazed. The bees, I don't know where they come from, but man, it is loaded and it is so much fun to stand there and watch them do their thing on that buckwheat flowering.
Hmm.
And you can just literally hear the field hum.
Yeah, yeah,
You know,
butterflies too.
yeah, you could just hear them humming, and then you can get near them, and they're not out to sting you or nothing silly. But I mean, you can pet them or whatever. They're busy. They're busy suckling
Hmm.
on that flowering buckwheat. But
Yep.
the bee. If you're into bees, man, you got to plant the buckwheat.
Yeah, just be careful when you plant it. It does mature very fast. Most times you want to kind of terminate it before it gets, the seeds. Otherwise, you'll
Hard,
get,
yeah. Before they get hard headed.
right, you'll get a second crop of buckwheat, which if it's a lot, it could kind of maybe crowd out what you actually just planted. So,
Yeah.
just keep an eye. Once you get the flowers, you have like maybe 7 to 10 days, and then you'll start getting the seed heads. So
Yeah.
you want to terminate it during that flower stage.
Yeah, yeah, you don't want them to start dropping seed. Like
Right.
you said, it'll crowd out the next part.
hmm Next up is, should you plant screening? Your turn.
Um, that depends on your entrance and exit, or if you're near a road or you're near a fence, a property line or something. Uh, I like. I mean, I do it for all those reasons just mentioned. I do it for all those reasons, but what I really like is the benefits of the deer get so comfortable inside their little compartments that you build, because I like to screen in at least three-sided, almost a square, total
hmm
square around the plots. And they get so comfortable in there. And, you know, if you have a plot that's screened in and you have one that's not, they gravitate to the screened in portion. You will actually see them go over there and get comfortable and feed through that plot.
hmm
They just enjoy being in there. And we talked about this before, how some family groups don't like to be around other family groups. So they can compartmentalize and go get in there and, you know, and if others move in, they can move out, whatever. So yeah, I do like it. They don't have to they necessarily don't look and see outside of it. Um because they're feeling so comfortable. There could be a pack of coyotes on the outside of that screening. They don't know it and they don't care, you know? But it does make them very comfortable. And if you can set up a stand on a food plot with screening coming past your stand, and they're going to walk around that screening to go to a plot or something, it's very strategic. You can bend that past your stand and make them walk past it and past you and possibly get a good shot on a critter.
Yep. Here's what I like about it.
And
Whether
and once you I'm sorry, but once that crop is finished and you go and you plow that back up, the dirt is just black underneath there. It
Mhm.
looks so great.
Yep. Um, what I like about it, whether it's you know Egyptian wheat or you know uh, switchgrass or whatever it is, what I like is you can, like Chris said, you can kind of direct them, direct the flow of traffic the way you want them to pass your stand. But a cool story about it is, um, the old farm me and Chris used to hunt. It was a 3-acre field, but what I did was I screened in sections so they could feed separately. But what I did was, you weren't there for this. I have actually a hunting video on my channel about it, but this pretty good buck, it came out from the apple trees, right?
Mm.
And it was during a rut. He walked down the Egyptian wheat line toward me. He was walking right to me. Remember the year we mowed the little 4-foot path wide, you
Yeah.
know, wide
Kept
path
an
through it?
opening. Yep.
Yep. He walked down that Egyptian wheat, right?
90
He
degree turn.
turned right through that path
Yeah.
because he was during a rut and he was looking for does and he couldn't see through the Egyptian wheat. So he knew to come down that path and go into that opening so he could actually see what's in that plot.
Hmm.
Now, unfortunately, I didn't get a shot because that tree, that single tree we left when we
Yep.
bulldozed, it
Yep.
just was too far and it just didn't work. But if you can set that up to where you can mow an opening like literally right by your stand, a lot of times during the rut, those deer will walk that edge because they like edge. They'll walk that edge. And if you can kind of wave it a little bit, it's better instead of a straight line. But um, and you could mow that, later on, but have that opening right by your stand, and those deer will straight on in there.
Now, what I did to enhance that even is I buried a rub tree in the ground right there.
hmm
So it drew by eyesight you know, they wanted to come over there and leave their scent on that rub tree, and the opening was right there. So
Hmm.
if they were headed for the opening already, they would stop at that tree and check it.
Hmm.
Or they were coming to check out the tree and was like, "Hey, there's an opening here. Let's go out here and feed." And if there was does inside of it, it was like, "Ooh, bonus. We're going to
Yep.
chase these does around." You know,
Hmm.
so it focused them to that apex to come right there. And that's what I wanted. I wanted them right there where I can get that 15-yard shot, you know.
Hmm.
So,
Quick side note with Egyptian wheat, I get this question all the time, and I don't know if we've ever mentioned it on here, but a lot of guys ask on my YouTube channel, can they plant Egyptian wheat in the woods for screening?
oh,
I, no, you can't.
not a good
Egyptian wheat
idea.
needs full sun. It needs
Yeah.
full sun um, for it
Yeah.
to grow and mature. And besides, what do you need screening for in the woods? The
Right.
woods
Right.
is already acting as a screen
Yeah.
per se. You could just hinge cut a few trees to make a screen, but no,
Hmm.
it needs full sun. The same with you know buckwheat. I did plant that on a road once, fire road, semi shaded, very low pH, and it did grow, but I noticed in that situation it only grew about a foot and then
Hmm.
it had flowers on it.
Yeah.
So
It
instead of it
early
growing,
mature. Yeah.
yep, instead of it growing 3, 4 feet tall and getting flowers, it grew about a foot and flowered.
Yeah, and you know
So,
why? Is because it wasn't getting enough photosynthesis, and when
right,
something's duressed and stressed like that, it throws all its nutrients to the top, and it's trying to survive, and it goes into kill mode,
right.
you know? So, what it did is it flowered early because it was ready to die, and then it probably did just die, so,
Yeah, it did. Yep.
yeah, but another just to add to what you was just saying with the Egyptian wheat or a screen of any sort of type. I did a video on my channel where I had the feed plot behind camp, and I always try to screen in three sides of that to differentiate the neighbor's property from mine. And you could tell, like there was overhanging tree line where I started it, and then it went into full sun, and then it went underneath two walnut trees which shaded it, and then it went past a couple of pine trees and turned 90 degrees and went past another pine tree. But every time it got behind or underneath a tree limb,
Yep.
it was like 6 foot tall, and everywhere it went underneath a limb, it was like only 3 feet tall.
Hmm.
So it was stunted out because it didn't get enough heat and sunlight to those portions. So it definitely 100% is full sun crop.
Yep.
Keep that in mind.
Hmm. Now
And it
here's one of my
loves heat. It loves heat.
here's one of my favorite favorites. Should somebody plant sunflowers?
Oh my. There, whose turn is it?
Mine.
Okay.
I was waiting for you to zip it.
Oh,
Zip it.
yes, massa.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Um, so I've never got so much hate from planting a crop than I have with sunflowers. Now, sunflowers are great. They're beautiful to look at. They all face one way. They all face the same way. They're very cool to look at. They're great for doves. People planning for dove hunting. I get all that. 100%. Do it. If that's your goal, do it. But what I think what doesn't get talked about enough about with sunflowers is improving the soil. You have to think that sunflower stalk. I mean, it's a thick stalk, and the whole thing's just full of moisture. The giant heads on them, all full of organic matter that can be turned back into the soil. So I like planting them to look at them. They're cool to look at. They're fun, but I use them to improve the soil. That little plot we had, the soil was terrible there. That first year when I planted sunflowers in it and turned it back in, I mean it I bet you it shaved 2 years off of trying to rebuild that plot because of all that organic matter getting back into that soil. And then we mowed it down. We mowed it down, and I disked it back into the soil, and all those heads and stalks and everything decomposing in the soil. The only downside to them is the deer can tear them apart. They'll
Yeah.
eat the leaves off of them. They can eat them down to the dirt. They potentially could be hard to get established, but if
Yeah.
you can get them going, turn them suckers back into the soil, it's amazing.
Yeah. I remember when we planted them, and I was amazed when we came back, and there they stood.
Hmm.
Because when I tried to plant them here, every one got plucked out of the ground either by a crow or
Hmm.
the deer just ate them off so quick. They didn't even have a chance to get over 8 inches tall. So one of the keys is you have to plant enough, kind of like your soybeans. You have to plant enough of it to take that predation, that pressure off of them, and maybe you'll get some. So
Hmm.
that was where I went wrong. Is I tried to plant them like a screen, I guess. 4 foot wide. That's when we had the Ferminator here, and I planted like a 4 foot strip of them for 150 yards. But it was really easy for the crows and the deer just to walk along that strip and just pick them all out,
Hmm.
rather than if they was just browsing in a 2 acre field full of sunflower seed.
Right.
But yeah, it was easy for them to just go along like a vacuum cleaner and suck them all out, I guess, because I got nothing out of it.
Well, the first year we planted them at the farm, they never touched them.
Hmm.
The second year, they annihilated them.
Yeah.
I mean, tore them up. I mean, you couldn't even grow them.
Yeah, it's
So
amazing
yeah,
difference.
yeah, it is.
That we did
Okay,
get some hate,
yeah.
lots of hate.
Um, Lots of hate. Uh, One thing that I'm 50-50 on. I have a love-hate relationship. But should somebody plant brassicas?
Mm.
Your turn.
Um, I mean, everybody wants to plant brassicas,
Hmm.
and the reason is there's this trend that they see on the computer, and they see these people with these great big bulbs or tubers that they're holding, and they think that equates to deer food, and everybody wants a pretty brassica plot.
Hmm.
Now, normally, if somebody has brassicas that are that bulbs are that big or the tubers are that long or whatever, that's an overly mature plant to begin with. And you know what I say about overly mature plants is the deer aren't after overly mature, woody stemmed, you know, unpalatable stemmy things. They like the soft, tender, lower growth. So, what I'm about to say is those folks probably planted way early, like back in June sometime or something, and are showing you these big monster bulbs right before archery season and saying, "Look what I got." Well, that's fine, but because that stuff's already overly mature, and I doubt the deer are hammering them as if when I planted mine in August or beginning of September, and they're only a foot tall, and the bulbs are still growing for that later time period. Um, I mean, someone could probably argue with me on that. I don't care, but I think they're very beneficial. I mean, they're easy to grow. It's like clover. You could throw it on the dirt before a rain. They're almost foolproof to grow,
Hmm.
unless you get the drought monsoon conditions that we had in the last 4 years. Uh, I think they're beneficial. I think everybody should try some. I wouldn't plant them standalone either. I would have them in a blend. Uh, I do plant some variety of them every year. So I would say go ahead and plant them. Just don't get them in the dirt too early so that they're overly mature. I would say hold off and put them in end of July, sometime in August, latest beginning September, so that they're ready to go for your archery season, so that they're
Mhm.
not too overly mature. But it's all on what you want too. I mean, if you just want to advertise these big monsters and take pictures, go ahead, plant them in June.
Yep.
That's what I.
So,
That's. I mean, that's my opinion.
all right. Well, I do like them, but sometimes a deer won't eat them. Sometimes it takes maybe a couple years for them to get used to it. And like really, I'll going to say the same thing Chris did. You know, there's a trend where everybody likes to plant them so early in like June, early July or whatever, because they want to get these huge bulbs. Well, deer don't necessarily prefer those huge bulbs, but um, you can plant them based on when you want the attraction to be. So if you want the attraction later into the winter, you plant your brassicas sooner in the summer. If you want the attraction earlier in like October, November, then you can plant them later in the summer, say August timeframe. So um, I also you have to be careful because they can get wiped out. If you plant them in there and they got the young tender leaves, the deer can wipe you out. So, there's a minimum, or acreage sometimes,
Yeah,
where you might need like a half acre or an acre because you have a high deer density. So
and that's why I
it,
say a blend too, because if they
yeah,
wipe out, if they
right.
pick out all your brassicas, then you have something else blended that's growing
Yeah.
with it.
Yep. And it's also a good way to get clover established. You can plant your clover mixed with your brassicas in the fall, and then the following spring you have a clover plot that you can maintain.
Hmm.
So there's pros and cons to all of these things. Just have a reason and have a purpose. Um, Last thing on the list, and it's probably one of my favorites. It's just wheat and rye.
Mm, yeah,
Um, I guess I'm up, but
yeah,
wheat and rye is so easy to establish. It is the most browse tolerant thing you can plant. Um, very cold hardy. The deer will eat that stuff all year long. And then, especially in the winter, you get a couple warm